Oh no, they nerfed Glancing Blows, Necromancer, everything? Anyway. Hi, Zizaran here. With the upcoming Heist League, there's been a lot of nerfs, a lot of buffs, but surprisingly, something that is untouched and that I was hoping would be nerfed was Essence Drain. Essence Drain has not really been nerfed, so it's going to be a very strong build in the upcoming Heist League. So for those of you that just want something to farm a lot of currency early on, and a strong build, obviously it's going to be harder to do than Harvest, but every build will be harder to do than Harvest. Essence Drain was insanely easy in Harvest because like so much of the gear was very like guaranteeable. Obviously we don't have deterministic crafting anymore, but I wanted to do an update, talk a little bit about Spellslinger and tips and tricks for Essence Drain and everything like that. So yeah, this is an insanely good build. This is like guaranteed going to be a good starter. It's got good single target. Obviously, if you want to do like Awakener 8, then you need a high investment into it. We do get some new players that really struggle on scaling it, but I'm going to try to cover everything and give you the ins and out of Essence Drain here. So as per normal for all my build guides, we do a very step-by-step guide where like you see 20 points, 31 points, and we do have an in-depth explanation of all the guides here in the description if it's your first time following one of our guides. A lot of people quite like leveling with Spellslinger, and obviously that got nerfed. If you don't know what changed, Spellslinger went from 20% restoration to 30 at the first level, and then it tapers down by leveling. So at level 20, it has 25% restoration. This makes it a lot harder for leveling, and I think we're still going to see a lot of people doing this for racing and things like that. I've played around with it a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about Spellslinger because I know a lot of people love leveling it like that. So I have one character here where I was trying to simulate the new mana restoration and the Spellslingers, and I have like a Spellslinger with a 1-link Soul Rend, just Void Manip. Then I have Essence Drain, Void Manipulation, Phyrexian Spellslinger, and also Contagion Spellslinger here. I'll do a like quick showcase of Spellslinger. This is including the new restoration. I actually have 15 mana too much because my precision gem is still leveling, but as you can see, like still clears. Now the problem is there's quite a lot of like investment going on here. I have charisma. Yeah, as you can see, like clears fine. Carvarusco as well, I saw was experimenting with pretty much just using Soul Rend, so he had no contagion. And I think that would probably be the way forward, where you would be using either only Soul Rend or Soul Rend and then maybe self-cast Essence Drain while leveling. So if you really do want to do Spellslinger, that's probably not something I'm going to be recommending for new players, but it should still be doable. And then you'd be definitely using Bane for additional single target as well. This is not really going to be covered in the guide for like how to do the Spellslinger version because I'm not 100% sure how strong that is. The self-cast version, we know this is good. One thing that I do want to talk about here, which is obviously Ascendancy Points, is a little bit different whether you're going Spellslinger or not. And I want to talk a little bit about the reasoning for how we ascend. So for self-cast Essence Drain, you'll see most people taking Swift Killer. And there is some confusion, especially at the end game, between having Swift Killer or Prolonged Pain. So generally, the way I would ascend a self-cast Essence Drain is Swift Killer, then Patient Reaper, then Ghost Dance into Escape Artist. Now, sometimes you'll see people switching out for like Awakener or bosses for Prolonged Pain. So let's talk a little bit about the differences here. So obviously you get 4 Frenzy Charges that are giving you 4% more damage each. So that is 16% more damage from the Frenzy Charges. And then you're getting 40% increased damage because you have 4 Frenzy and 4 Power, right? So we're comparing this. So you're basically comparing the 16% more and 40% increased versus the 20% more of Prolonged Pain. And then you also have a little bit of duration, which, you know, as long as you're keeping the uptime, POB will actually show that it's a DPS increase, but it's not as long as there's no downtime. So damage over time duration or skill effect duration is a little bit wonky in POB, sadly, which makes it like harder for new players to understand. Generally, Swift Killer is always better. The only thing is that, let's say at Awakener or some boss fights, you might not have the Frenzy charges up. And another thing that is just objectively better is to drop Swift Killer, do Prolonged Pain, and then have the minimum Frenzy charge craft on your rings and amulets, because then you have 3 minimum Frenzy charges, giving you 12% more damage, and then you also have the 20% from Prolonged Pain. So that is better. I just wanted to talk about the differences and why people take Swift Killer when new players might think Prolonged Pain is better. And for Spellslinger, obviously Prolonged Pain is better because you're getting Frenzy charges from the Frenzy skill. And I have a couple of endgame skill trees here. So I have I made a fairly stretched out. This is assuming you have no cluster jewels and stuff. Then I have one with cluster jewels here, and I want to talk about that because these cluster jewels are harder to roll now, but you ideally want Conjured Wall and Mage Hunter, and that's because you still want to get a lot of block. Trickster is probably the easiest ascendancy to still justify glancing blows with, because it doesn't properly remove the ghost shrouds when you take damage through glancing blows. And I would also recommend looking into aspect of the crab super endgame, because that also does not get removed with glancing blows up. So even though glancing blows has been nerfed, you take 30% more damage compared to before. It's still pretty good on Trickster, and once you get a energy shield or a life on block shield, then you should still feel like borderline immortal against like normal monsters. And then we are also going to be covering CI and switching to CI here. This tree as well that I have made up is a lot easier and like a smaller respec to switch to CI. Let's talk a little bit about the leveling process. So there's different approaches to this. A lot of people really enjoy doing Caustic Arrow early and even using Toxic Rain at level 12 for additional single target. I don't have it in here, but the Toxic Rain single target, if you do like the bows early, I usually prefer going very early Essence Drain, unless you're going Spellslinger. But the Toxic Rain would be Swift Assembly and the Blast Mine thing, so that you can actually use Toxic as a mine. Then you have like the Caustic Arrow and Toxic on bosses, and then Caustic for clearing. And the Caustic's basically just Void Manipulation and Pierce, and then you would have Onslaught on your Frost Blink very early. Now, normally, I think for most people, you're going to feel very comfortable with just Blight and Contagion and getting Essence Drain at level 12. Early on, you want some damage support on your Contagion, and that will be part of your actual damage. And then a lot of people will switch to Spellslinger at 28, probably still, even though it's going to be a lot jankier and not as insane as before. So I would say like leveling with self-cast Essence Drain now is going to feel better for a lot of people. You don't have to invest like loads of points into Charisma and the reduced mana restoration here. And it is very, very nice. And we have like the end game setup we're showing here too. I do want to explain this in the video because I always get a lot of questions here. But the important thing to remember is that Essence Drain doesn't really have a good 6th link. The 6th link is either ideally level 4 Empower, but obviously getting even a level 3 Empower is very, very hard early on. And that is why the 6th link is Energy Leech, giving us 24% more damage while on full Energy Shield. That also makes it that a lot of people will focusing on either 4 or 5 linking their Essence Drain in something special. I can show that on one of my characters here as well in game that has really, really good gear. So here is like a pretty much perfect character, and this character is called Zizaran Invisible Stampede. But even without the corruption, gloves like these are pretty easy to make, not super early, but in the first week, let's say. And the way they work is they use a Essence of Delirium, which gives you 30% more damage over time on gloves. And then you can, you know, before having multi-mod, you can just craft +1 AoE or +1 projectile. That's already pretty good, because then you can, you know, either 5 or 6 link your Blight self-cast. I have here a Blight self-cast on a 5 link, and I've been doing like Awakener 8, Uber Elder, and stuff like that very, very easily. And again, this is an insanely geared character. Obviously no 6 link, but the Essence Drain here has 600,000 damage over time in-game. And if you're ever wondering where you look at damage over time, is this one is how you see DPS, not the one like up there, because that's just the initial hit and you're not like spamming Essence Drain like this. We make sure that all our like early starter guides work with garbage. We never try to get like any like insane clickbait damage damage like numbers that we're trying to get. It is literally just like make sure that the build looks good with crap gear like this. It's just life and everything, no crazy damage mods. And then we have like some early CI, how you should swap. You want at least 6,000 or 7,000 energy shield early. And then we have like end game ideas with, like, for example, +2 amulet. Damage over time multiplier is the #1 priority stat for anything. Obviously gem levels as well. I think +1 level is the same as like 22 damage over time multiplier, 20. On ones you can get up to 38, and that is an insane damage multiplier. So let's talk a little bit about that, just so people can understand. So you have like increased damage, spell damage, or damage over time. They're all the same, but then you have damage over time multiplier, which is a lot stronger and is the #1 thing you want on gear. As far as skill points goes, or bandits I mean, you kill them. You can help a Lyra on day 1 to resist cap easier, but I personally think it's pretty easy to resist cap. And then Pantheons, early on you have like a lot of like cheap easy ones you can get, like for example Diamond Skin's really good, Protocol Perfection's really good and cheap. However, we actually have an insanely strong Pantheon that's relatively cheap, Command of Steel, which is an Amber, a Crimson, and an Opalescent, and you get 75 block fairly easily on this build with Glancing Blows, just to 75% damage. Now, because of Glancing Blows being nerfed, endgame, especially for map clearing, you could look into using a Roomies, investing into actual block nodes and block on your shield. That would probably require actually getting a fairly high spell block roll on your shield and then going pure block, because it has been nerfed quite a lot, but early on I think you're still going to be relying on Glancing Blows. So for example, and I want to talk a little bit about DPS and having enough damage. Normally I want that number, if I want to do like Awakener 8 comfortably and like high-end bosses, I want that number to be like 280,000 to 300k on my Essence Strain, and then either have like a 6-link blight or a 5-link blight. One of the problems new players encounter is that they're maybe not using blight enough for their damage, and it is a huge amount of their damage. You can see the damage over time per second here only shows us like 58,000, but it is like you really notice the damage when you're slamming down your blight. To really get it past 300k, you're gonna need to get like a nice wand with at least 1 +1 levels, so you're most likely getting +1 chaos spell skill gems, fairly high spell damage, spell skill gems, and spell damage equal out, or I think it's either 70 or 80% spell damage. It's the same as +1 levels for the most part. And then yeah, you really want high damage over time multiplier too. And you can see that we do have a trigger socketed spell when you use this skill here, and then I use like Cold Snap, gets you frenzy charges if you're not normally getting it. Tempest Shield, obviously really nice for the block. And then I also have a fairly low level steel skin here, which I just threw in to have something there. Essence Strain is a build that isn't like notorious for its like crazy high damage. It's more about giving you a lot of mobility and having the freedom to play around with your character with not like having to sit still and do damage all the time in like harder boss fights. You can throw Essence Strain and run around. It's definitely not the easiest thing to scale damage on early, so hopefully that helps you guys like scale it a little bit more. There is a lot of people that are going to be asking about Witchfire Brew. I'm a massive fan of never using this flask. The aura of the Witchfire Brew is around this, and obviously the increased damage over time is pretty much the same or slightly less damage than you're getting off a Sulfur Flask, and then the aura itself is never on, and for boss fights it doesn't last long enough for the fight. So generally I would most people use Bane and Despair will help a lot on your single target as well, and I would recommend using that. You can be lazy like I do and just get a Despair on hit, and that's nice too. And now the #1 important thing for any Trickster Ascendancy, no matter what you're doing, is going to be using a Jade Flask. I remember the first time I made a guide like this, we had a lot of people say, Ziz, I'm really struggling in survival, I don't understand why, and all of these people were not using a Jade Flask. The reason for that is because of Ghost Dance and the fact that you're getting so much energy shield back whenever you take a hit based on your evasion. So make sure that in Act 7 you take a Jade Flask. It's very important for Tricksters, for any Trickster, no matter what Ascendancy or what you're doing. I mean, just any Trickster that has ghost dance. Let's cover the things to solve for every build guide that I do at the end. Are there too many gems to equip? No, generally you don't really need unset rings for this. Both the life and CI version is fairly easy to hit and fit all your gems. As far as mana issues goes, not really. If you ever do Spell Slinger, that obviously has no mana issues because you can even default attack. What some people like, until you get Patient Reaper for your Cruel Ascendancy, you can very early on take Soul Siphon. You might find that you can either like stop relying on your mana fast by having Soul Siphon, or like just completely remove it. That can be a little bit annoying for bosses because obviously you're not getting mana back on kill, but consider taking Soul Siphon early on to help with the mana if you're self-casting. Then you can get rid of that as soon as you get Patient Reaper. As far as leveling unique goes, I would say it's mostly about rare items would be leveling uniques. The +1 Chaos Gem wand very early on, or damage over time multiplier wands are huge. That's pretty much all you're looking for. You could get a duration tabula as well, would be very, very nice for this build, but just the standard like Gold Rim Wanderlust. And as far as like the way your defenses work, you're generally barely ever getting hit, and then when you do get hit, you have a pretty decent buffer, so you're not getting one shot. Definitely with glancing blows being nerfed, I feel like you have to put a little bit more pressure on maybe using shield charge instead of smoke mine. I know smoke mine and flame dash feels like very nice for a lot of people, but shield charge giving you fortify is going to be a big part of your defense now, with glancing blows not offering the same amount of reduction. As far as auras, you're going to be using Malevolence, and you're going to be using Skitterboss. Once you are CI, you'll be, instead of Skitterboss, you'll be using Discipline. And then whenever you're able to get Reservation somewhere, like for example by the Helm enchant, then you can look into getting Aspect of the Crab for defenses, or especially if you want more damage and you're playing on softcore, you can get Aspect of the Spider. As far as drawbacks for this build, obviously like every build is going to have a harder time with gear and stuff without harvest and deterministic crafting. But this is one of the builds where people will often come to me and be like, Zizaran, how do I scale my damage? I feel like it's low. And like we talked about during the episode and during the guide here, it's a little bit hard to scale the damage, and you will have to invest into it with things like getting plus gem levels. So I would recommend like putting as much effort into scaling it endgame and looking a little bit about like the examples we have here, and also the characters Zizaran, Invisible Stampede. And I do recommend switching to CI and going full energy shield endgame. I would say life is just like you're on your way. And it's worth mentioning as well, you will see, especially a lot of softcore player will do bow essence drain. This is like a lot more damage, but then you're getting rid of like a huge defensive aspect. That's pretty much everything I wanted to cover for energy shield. I know I've done a lot of guides like this lately. It's a very strong build, and I want to make sure that you guys have it as an option and know how to use it with the changes. So hope this helps you in the upcoming Heist League. And yeah, good luck. I hope you all do well in the league and try to die less than I do.